Tangled. Well, it has a sun on it, because it has the sun on the lantern for the Corona Kingdom, if you've seen Tangled. Disney's very well-made version of Rapunzel that I love. There's sun there. They released lots of lanterns in regards to hope. They did something very similar in Wano. They do something very similar all over our world, and another, all over our world, and even has popped up in other variations of fiction where they release lanterns for hope. And yeah, I know it's not exactly the best time for that concept in regards to, there's not really much Wano in this chapter beyond Yamato in the cover page, but I figured it was applicable given the fact that we're going to get 2 Nikas by the end of the chapter. So yeah, there's that. So going into the chapter 1118, called Being Free. And we finally get to the point in Yamato's cover story where they are actually leaving the flower capital. So it's just volume 8, finally volume 8, and it's setting off. And Yamato's just heading off. We see a lot of people in the background. I don't think I recognize any of them. Not that I can tell off the top of my head. And Yamato's just eating the bento box that Hiyori and Toko made her. So that's just cute. Made him. Excuse me. Still getting used to that. Sorry. I know it's been a while. I just have that brain tick. Into the actual chapter, pretty much where we left off at the end of the last one, where we see the giant robot, the ancient giant robot, being knocked off the island. And it is now landing in the water, right on top of a bunch of marine ships. So that's just going to probably cause a lot of damage to them. Not that the Gorosei care. They'd rather get the giant robot out of there along with the message, even if it takes out some marine vessels, to save themselves even more of the information getting out that's already going to do a lot of damage to their world government's reputation. So it gets sent flying, and a bunch of the Marines are just in total panic mode, or just jump overboard. Is that a metal creature? It's gonna sink the ships. And it just right on top of the ships. And it's still on fire. So it's still on fire. It's landing on the ships. Those soldiers, those Marine soldiers are probably dead. And it keeps sinking, and we actually cut inside of the giant where we see the transponder snail, the specially designed one, that is there. And it's still talking, where it's and their name was... So it's attempting to try to continue the message from Vegapunk, but the signal's being messed with. It's been dumped in water, and we know the snails don't generally do well dumped in water. We kind of saw that at... Marineford, when Buggy was trying to film with one of the snails, and it got frozen by Aokiji, and then they dipped it in the water to get rid of it, and then the snail was fine, and then it just shriveled up, because it's oh god, water, no! So there's that. There's also a reference to them being kind of weak against water in the live action, when Nami's little, earpiece one that she uses to communicate with Arlong gets drowned. So there's that. And we hear the giant's thoughts again, and it's just where are you? Where did you go, Joy Boy? As it's sinking into the water. It's I wanted our paths to cross. You were here, right, Joy Boy? How strange. How very strange. Although it's probably going to be a more robotic type of a voice. As it's sinking into the ocean. And, we've kind of determined that, okay, this thing seems to be powered to a degree by the drums of liberation heartbeat that, Luffy gives off in reference to Joy Boy, in reference to Nika. And so this thing the robot seems to respond to that, but could get a little bit more, information about that. Particularly what happened 800 years ago, which we might get a glimpse at Marie Joie. Might get maybe a glimpse of how that worked at Marie Joie, for why it was able to be powered 800 years ago. Oh, not 800 years ago, 200 years ago when it attacked Maurice Ross. So we cut back to the coastline where Mercury has shown up on the coastline, giant flaming boar, mammoth thing. And we have a bunch of the sailors watching, and it's just like, now what the hell is that? So like, it's a giant boar. It's a mammoth. And it's like, insert mammoth swine joke. And they're like, what's the deal with this crazy island? And Mercury's just kind of making sure that the robot has continued to sink. It's like, okay, it landed in the ocean, and it is sinking. Okay. That's possibly one thing taken care of. Now let's work on the other bunch of things we got to deal with on this island. And we cut back to just some of the other kingdoms that we've seen. The country that it cuts to kind of looks like people dressed from like Norway or something like that, with like lots of warm knit clothing and stuff like that, and slightly Viking style houses. Although I guess it technically could be Elbath, but I don't know if Elbath would have like communication snails to communicate with the rest of the world, even with, you know, Shanks there and Saul there and stuff like that. Plus, the snail that we see does not seem to be a giant frickin' snail. It seems to be one of the regular sized visual Denten Mushi that we've seen, which are quite large, but in this case, it doesn't look like this one seems to be overly large. But it's like, it's kind of like that Scandinavia, Norwegian feel to this little town. And all the villagers were like, did something go wrong? He was cut off mid-sentence. What could have caused the broadcast termination? Now that I think about it, what could have killed a genius like Vegapunk in the first place? And then we cut to Alabasta, where we see Koza and his father Toto. And then we also see, like, I think he's supposed to be the young boy that noticed that Bon Clay was pretending to be the king. I think he's there as well, plus just a bunch of other random civilians that are there. And Koza and Toto are not saying anything. Now, given the fact that Koza is like best friends with Vivi, and Toto is his father, and Toto interacted a lot with the Straw Hats when they were at Yuba and with Vivi and everything like that, so he knows that they're good. He knows that the Straw Hats are good. And Koza, given his, that he's talked to his father about this, he, has probably talked to Vivi about, the Straw Hats. So Koza knows that the Straw Hats are good. The majority of the citizens of Alabasta, well, we know that, like, the guards in the castle, in Alubarna and such, at the palace of Alubarna, like, they knew that the Straw Hats were good because, they witnessed, Luffy fighting Crocodile to try to save Vivi. And, of course, Pell and Chaka would have been able to, like, pass on information and stuff like that. And, of course, Igaram would have been able to tell them that, yeah, no, they're good, they're fine, afterwards and everything like that. Plus, like, a lot of them saw the Straw Hats, having the big feast with, like, Vivi and Cobra, after all the battling was finished and everything, and, Luffy woke up. So, it's not surprising that, like, a lot of the citizens may not 100% know that the Straw Hats are good, and it also just depends on, like, how far that information spread. So they're just like, don't tell me someone's had him killed. He did say he committed grave sins, but the government wouldn't just erase him, would they? And it was like, no way. Remember what was happening before all this? Straw Hat Luffy was holding him hostage. It was like, this is obviously the work of those dastardly pirates. I'm like, I appreciate the use of the word dastardly. I really hope that's in the official translation. I'm like, dastardly. Yes, very well done. So it's like, there are certain people in, like as I've mentioned before, in, like, the countries that the Straw Hats have visited, the towns and villages and, islands and stuff like that the Straw Hats have visited, that know that the Straw Hats are good, but that doesn't mean that the entire populace of the island know that the Straw Hats are good. Fishman Island and Dressrosa kind of, notwithstanding, and Wano notwithstanding, because, of course, what happened there. But, like, in Alabasta, it wasn't as publicized that the Straw Hats were the ones that took down Crocodile. That was stated to have been Smoker that took down Crocodile, not the Straw Hats to save face. And, of course, during Dressrosa, that was just broadcast all over the island, that Luffy was fighting against Crocodile and fighting against Doflamingo and everything like that. So it's like, there's these different circumstances, and we're going to kind of get caught up on two of those islands where we've had some, we're going to see Rebecca in a minute, and we're going to see some other people that I'm really glad we got to see because we have not seen them for a while in a minute. Actually, we'll just go to that now. So we cut to Whiskey Peak on, I think it's Cactus Island or whatever, and we see Miss Monday, who is the former member of Baroque Works, and they seem to have adjusted her skin tone. And she's one of the former members of Baroque Works that had been paired up with Igaram. And then we also have Mr. Nine, I believe, who is there, and they got married. Mr. Nine had been Vivi's partner when they were part of she was part of Baroque Works, and we know that via a cover story that they got married and they have a baby. And the baby has a little crown, like the joke, like his dad has a little crown. So we have like them, and I love seeing them. And then we also just like see some of the other random civilians that might be former Baroque Works agents that live there on the island, or might not be. I highly doubt they have any connection to the Cross Guild or anything along those lines. But it's kind of like, it's nice seeing them. Like it was nice seeing, the people from the Spider Cafe. Several chapters ago where we saw, Miss Golden Week and, and Dofi and stuff, Dropey or whatever her name was. It was the mole that was Miss Merry Christmas. Like, it was nice seeing them, and it's nice seeing these guys again after so long. I think I talked about these guys in, like, the couple series that I did, because they are a canon couple. But, we just got people talking, and it was like, the world government would never kill off the world's greatest mind, even if he did break a few laws. Wrong. Or at least in this case, wrong. In our world, things might get a little bit, shifted around, depending on the circumstances and whose side of the war they were on. Yeah. Then we cut to Dressrosa, where we have Leo and Rebecca, and, last time we saw them, they were, Rebecca had, her training with Kyros had been interrupted for while the broadcast was going on, and of course Leo's there watching the broadcast with her, and Leo's just like, so it really was Luffy Land, and Rebecca is just off to the side, looking at him oh, come on. She's just like, we went over this already, Leo. Luffy didn't do it. Luffy would not harm Vegapunk. Stop being so gullible. I love it. Just the look on Rebecca's face is like, how many times do I have to explain this to you? It's just the look on her face. Like, Lord help me. Lord Nika help me. Cutting back to Egghead Island, we cut back to York, who is still using, was communicating with the other not with the Vegapunks, but with the Five Elders. And she's like, yeah, what's up? And they're like, how many of you Vegapunks survived? And she's like, Vegapunks? Other than me? I just checked who's still interacting with Punk Records. There's only 2 left. And we see Lilith and Atlas pictured. So that implies that Edison has either fully cut himself off from Punk Records and is actually, just stopped working and is dead. We already knew about Vegapunk being actually dead, and of course, Shaka and Pythagoras, they're gone, unfortunately. But of course, as we learned from York, you can prevent yourself from communicating with Punk Records. You can stop the communicate from yourself to Punk Records and not have information flow one way or the other, or both ways, I guess, depending on the circumstance. And so it could be Edison is kind of cutting himself off and trying to do something else because he's very badly injured right now and might be trying to do something. Plus there's the whole side theory about well, if they have replaceable parts for the Vegapunks, that, and Pythagoras could be fixed, or they might have a spare body for Shaka and everything like that because of, the reference to there being 2, Daft Punked people and having him show up in a different punk helmet. So there's those theories, but it's I don't know. We'll have to wait and see. I'm not expecting either of them to show back up again. I would love it if they did. I liked both of them, but I'm not expecting them to. And York is relaying this information to them. We see Mercury's still running around. We see Saturn in the background, and then I think we also see Mars in the background flying around. I don't think we see Jupiter in this chapter, and we don't see Nasjuro because he's still up in the dome area fighting against Zoro and Jinbei, assumedly. But Lilith is relaying this information, or York is relaying this information of Lilith is still on this stratum, so she's still up here with the straw hats, and then she's like, and Atlas is down at the northeast coast. And then we have the Gorosei interacting with each other, and they're just like, so, shall we eliminate them? Yes. Punk Records appears to have been programmed to function and grow even after the Stella's termination. We can benefit from it through York. The other two geniuses are nothing but loose ends, which, I mean, that works into their plans anyway, plus it kind of confirms, like, the theory that a lot of people have. It's like, well, if all the Vegapunks die, this thing has to keep growing. Otherwise, Vegapunk wouldn't be able to keep it going after his death, or even after all of them had been terminated. He wouldn't be able to keep the Vegapunk Records Wikipedia going again. Vegapedia or whatever you want to call it. They wouldn't be able to keep that going. So that kind of just confirms that theory that we've thought that has been around for a while. Not surprising. We cut down to the northeast coast of the island, where we see that the Elbathian Giant's ship is now trying to sail off. As they're trying to get away from the island, it's like, let's get out of here. And again, we see how much it just dwarfs the marine ships. But the marine ships, we know, were able to do some bits of damage, and we know that Bluegrass with the giraffe sea beast, cyber sea beast, was able to, punch a hole in the ship. Although, in the hull of the ship, although I don't know exactly how much damage that did. But we see Dory Bragi and Luffy just jumping onto the ship, or Luffy's kind of like hanging on to Dory or Bragi and then like jumping with them. And they're just like, we're hopping on, and it's like, whoopsie daisy, because the ship kind of tilts, which is kind of funny. There's like, captains, and they get on the ship, and they're just, they manage to get to the ship with Luffy, and they're just so happy. And, of course we know that, like, Atlas and Bonnie and Kuma and Sanji and then the Stella's body are on the ship as well. And they're just like, you made it. And she was like, of course we did. Go, blah, 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 blah. And then Bonnie is just, like, really happy to see Luffy, which I love that little relationship that they're showing there with Bonnie and Luffy, because, of course, Bonnie has realized that he is Nika, that he is like this god that her and her father have believed in and to a degree worshipped, all her life and all of his life. And like her and Luffy were like getting along fine even before she realized that, even before she like had the information that he was Nika. After before she had that realization. So I like that they're showing that she is happy to see Luffy, and I like that Luffy has at least one positive interaction with like another supernova who has a positive reaction to him, because like him, Law, and Kid, who's possibly at the bottom of the ocean right now, and Kid and Law is currently possibly hopefully getting medical attention, given that we saw Beppo got medical attention and was talking to the captain, was talking to Law in the last chapter. But it's like, I love that Luffy is having like a positive interaction with one of the other supernovas, because he had like a vaguely positive interaction with Drake during Onigashima, but it didn't go very far. It's not like they really had the chance to like fight alongside each other and learn each other a little bit better. But like, the one Luffy interacted with the most was Law. And, Law was doing it to have, this alliance, and Luffy's just like, yeah, no, we're friends now. And Law's like, why did I do this? And then, of course, Kid is kind of in the similar boat, where he's just like, yeah, fine, I'll help you take down the dragon and the giant hag, but then we're not friends anymore. We weren't friends to begin with, but then we're not allies anymore, type of a thing. And, like, all of that. And I like the fact that, like Luffy never really interacted with Hawkins that much beyond, like, fighting him a little bit on Wano. And he never really interacted with Apoo beyond fighting him on Wano. Again, not really long enough to determine any type of a situation where it was a possibility to have an alliance. And then with Beiji, yeah, they had the alliance that lasted like technically like a day, if that, in Totland. And again, wasn't exactly as 100% of an alliance as Luffy would have wanted, like what they have with Law for, dealing with Punk Hazard and Dressrosa, and then on Zoe, and then on Wano, and all of that. And so it was like that whole setup there. But I love the fact that here with Bonnie, that Bonnie is like really happy to see Luffy, and that like they seem to have like a really good bond going now, which is just kind of fun because they didn't really interact at Sabaody, and then like the only time they've really interacted is like now on on Egghead Island, which is kind of nice. And like Luffy, I like the fact that like, because like we're aware of like what Luffy's type of an alliance is. It's like, oh, if we're an alliance, then we're friends in this regard. Like the way that he treated it with like Law and Kid, that they were friends. Yeah, they're still rivals, but they're friends. Even though Kid wouldn't care if Luffy died after the battle or not. Well, he probably would want Luffy to live just because, but he didn't really care one way or the other. He just wanted Luffy to defeat Kaido and all of that. And same thing with, like Law might have cared a little bit more if Luffy died, just from, being around him a little bit more. But like with this, Bonnie's idea of an alliance might fit a little bit more with like Luffy's idea of an alliance, with the two of them working together, which I just would find adorable. And I'm rambling again, as I tend to do. But we have Luffy landing on the ship, and I love the forced perspective of this picture, for the way that Oda drew this, because for a second it looks like Luffy is a giant compared to like Sanji and Frankie, but then when you look closer, it's like, oh, it's just because like Luffy is like closer to the camera, closer to the viewer, to the reader, and then Sanji and Frankie are behind him, and then of course we have Dory and Bragi in the background. And of course Sanji has met Dory and Bragi before because he met them back on Little Garden. Frankie has not interacted with them before. I think Frankie met Oimo and Kashi back on Water 7 when everything happened there, and back on Enies Lobby during that interaction. I think Frankie may have met Dorian or may have met Oimo and Kashi. I don't remember. But like, in front, Luffy's just like, yay, we're on the giant ship. It's like, it's so huge. Where's Usopp? Isn't he here? What about Chopper? Feels like Luffy has not been able to pay attention to like what's been going on with the rest of the ones on the Thousand Sunny. So there's that. Cutting away a little bit away from the ship, we see some of the other just the marine ships are trying to chase them down, and it was like, damn it, chase them down. There's no way we can let them escape when we have this many battleships. The giants are too tough. Are you two gonna be okay? And we see that Bonnie used her powers on Doll and Bluegrass and this giraffe sea beast, which is adorable. So it's like Doll has been turned into the little kid. They've all been turned into like little kids, which is just adorable. I love Bonnie's powers being used on Marines. It's like, I'm gonna make you a child. Okay, I'm gonna leave now. So, they're all like shrunk down, and Doll is just like, Bonnie, you B-word. And then Bluegrass is just like, it's so frustrating to be rendered helpless like this. Her ability is incredible. And then we just have like the giraffe sea beast off to the side. It's just like, squeak. My mom loves giraffes, and I told her, you're going to be happy. I get to use a baby giraffe picture in the video today. And she's like, yay. No context needed. It's a baby giraffe. She doesn't care. And we cut back to the ship where we see Bonnie having, used her power. We saw that she could use her power as like a projectile through something, and like we also see that she has like a rifle in her hand. So way that she probably was able to affect them from that distance was she probably, loaded her power into the rifle and then like fired it and then hit, Doll and Bluegrass and the sea beast to turn them into like, babies. Into like, little kids again. So she did that, and she's like, you Marines are going to be in hot water for letting me get away, huh? And then we see, Oimo and Kashi, and I think Kashi is the one that was like, Kashi was like the one almost knocked out by Doll in the last chapter. And he's sitting there like he's got like the giant bump on his head, and he's just like, ow. And Oimo is just like, you look pretty beaten up, Kashi. And Luffy's just like, Oimo, Kashi, because he's so happy to see them. And then Sanji is communicating with Nami and her group, who are still up in the Labostratum, even though the lab phase, the laser grid has been down. They have to still jump down. And Sanji's like, Sanji here, we've successfully set off Nami. How's it looking up there? And she's like, we'll be right behind you. And then we have, I think it's Kashi or Oimo saying, Straw Hat, I've been itching to see you again. So we have that, and then we cut up to the Labostratum where we see the Thousand Sunny is, trying to coast down the island clouds. As I said, we do not see Zoro or Jinbei or Nasjuro in this chapter, but they're supposedly all still fighting each other to allow Nami and the others time to escape. And Nami's like, we'll be able to launch into the ocean thanks to Edison, but we may need you guys to help us land safely. And Sanji's like, of course Nami-san and Robin-chan and Lilith-chan are my top priority. And then Sanji keeps going, he's like, even if you sink, nothing could stop me from rescuing you ladies. And then Usopp is in the background of the back going, yeah, why not save everyone? Because there's still him and Brook and Chopper are there as well. 2 of which have devil fruit powers. So there's that. And Usopp, who is a scaredy cat. Not that I blame him in the slightest. And then Frankie is also just in the background. I was like, I'll make sure the ship isn't damaged. And then Usopp continues like, stop forgetting the rest of us! That's going to be funny to watch in the anime. And then we have someone shouting out from, I don't know if it's a Marine shouting out or a giant. Where like, something's coming from above the island, and down swoops Mars in his Itsumare form. And Sanji's like, it's another elder. They're really coming after us now, huh? And we see like Bonnie's like watching, like Bonnie's there behind Sanji, and then we cut inside of the kitchen or the galley or whatever of the giant ship, where we see the giant chef, who's a giant chef. Him and Sanji are hopefully going to get along great. I would have loved it if it was, what was his name? Pan's Fry from like the Z's Ambition little mini arc that they had in the anime that tied into Film Z. I would have loved if it was him, just to like canonize him, but it's not. That would have been fun. And he's like, oh, you must be Straw Hat Luffy. He's like, the captain's warned me about your appetite. That's why I had a bunch of food ready, but I wasn't planning on serving this all in one go. And Luffy's like, sorry, I gotta fill up now. Just cook some more later. He's just like chowing down on this giant thing of meat. And he's like, yeah, you really love to eat, don't you? You eat a lot, don't you? It's like, yeah. It's just funny. And then we have Mars has shown up by the ship, and he launches an attack. And I'm going to make another Pokemon joke here. Archeops used Hyper Beam. Don't know if I can learn it in the games, but I can learn it in a card. So I went with that. And Archeops hasn't appeared much in the anime, unfortunately. So he fires this attack at the ship in an attempt to try to, of course, burn the ship. And 2 of the giants jump forward using their shields to block it. And they're just like, protect the little people. So, I love that. And they're just like, it's really hot. And then we get their names. One is Bjorn and one is Sig. Don't know which one is which, but take your pick. And they're just like, you guys gotta hang in there, as they're like protecting the ship. And they're like, put out the flames. We can't let the sails catch fire. As like we cut away and like we see that the ship is on fire. And more of the Marines are just like, is that a bird monster? They're just like, what the F is going on here? I have no idea. First there was the giant flaming pig, now there's this thing. I don't know what the F is happening. And, you know, Sanji's like talking to one of the giants that's on fire, and he's like, we owe you one. And so it's like, thanks for having our backs, giants. And then Bonnie is just like, let's move Vegapunk and Daddy, and, you know, Vegapunk and Daddy, they'll burn. And Atlas is there and like getting, you know, picking up Kuma and Vegapunk and trying to get them out of the way. So that way they're not going to get caught on fire. Admittedly, Vegapunk is dead, so I guess at least don't want his body burning right now. So there's that. And then we see Dory and Broggy are just like, I guess there's no ignoring these monsters. And it's just like, if they can fly, they can chase us to the ends of the world. And Mars is shouting, not a single one of you are permitted to escape. And then everything just starts shaking. They're like, oh my god, is it another earthquake? Because it's like, I don't know. There were several earthquakes that they mentioned that happened because of the Lucia disappearing, being destroyed. Although I don't know exactly the whole setup for like how many of those earthquakes are still going to happen. But there's an earthquake happening. It's just like, and Luffy's like, ha! All right, my belly's full. Let's go. And he bursts out of the galley. And everything is just shaking, so it's like it's Luffy's power is activating, and that's making everything kind of shake because, you know, the drums of liberation are going off at the moment. So that's just kind of nice going on there, starting up. And they're like, no way. And like the Marines are like, no way, is what we heard is true? Are the sea levels really still rising? And they're like, this is bad. And then like Luffy jumps out in his Gear 5th form and he's like looking at Bonnie. And she's like, oh, wow, Nika. And he's like, again, I've got no idea who you're talking about. And then we have Dory and Broggy doing the Nika dance in the background, which is just funny as the ship is burning, which is referenced. It's just like, it's like a festival beat. And there was like, we can't both dance around like this, you blockhead. Who's going to put out the fires? And Luffy's looking at Bonnie, and he's just like, come on, don't you want to blow these guys out of the water? And she's like, I couldn't keep up with you in that form. And she's like remembering back to when they were first interacting, when they got to Egghead, where she made the comment of like, you don't look like your bounty poster. What happened to your white hair? And then Luffy does the whole, that's how I feel when I'm at my freest. And he's like the big and like, you know, looking strong type of a thing. And Luffy's telling her in the present, he's like, of course you can. I don't know how your powers work, but I'm sure you've got this. And of course she's just, you know, they're remembering, it's like, oh yeah, that's just how I look when I'm totally free. And Bonnie's just like, yeah, screw it, I'm gonna do this. And she starts activating her, you know, her distorted future. And she's like, give me a future where I'm totally free. And we get the big double page spread to finish out the chapter. And along one side we have, because like Kuma's body is still sitting there. And as we know, like his consciousness isn't like 100% there. It's barely there at all right now. But there's still something in there. And we get this little cut back to in his flashback that, you know, that Bonnie watched with his memories, where he's like, you can rest now, Jenny. I swear I'll raise her well. Which, of course, Kuma raised Bonnie very, very well. As is very evident. And Bonnie has just... She, you know, Nika's up and she's big like Luffy, and they're both giant. And, you know, she's got the white hair and the ribbon and everything like that. And Luffy's just laughing away in the background like, ha 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 ha, that's the spirit, Bonnie. So I love that there's that encouragement from Luffy there. And the Marines are just like, what the hell are they? Are they like two albino giants or something? And Mars is just watching, and Mars is just like, kind of like the, oh no, that's not good look on his face. And Luffy's just like, let's do this. And Bonnie's like, yeah. And they're just getting all hyped up and ready to attack. And Mars is thinking, I sense something is amiss. We must hurry. I'm like, well, yeah, something's amiss for you. You got two freaking Nikas getting ready to attack you. And all of that. And then we cut down to the Iron Giant again. And it's like, he's sensing the Nika drumbeat again. And he's like, there you are. And because there been this theory going through the community that, like, well, if Luffy is stated to be the only one in the last 800 years that managed to fully activate and awaken, Nika's devil fruit, then how could the Iron Giant have attacked Mary Geoise 200 years ago when 200 years ago there wouldn't have been a Nika, or there wouldn't have been someone who activated it? And given the amount of information gathering that the world government has with the Cipher Pull agencies and everything, and the Marines in general, that you would think that they would have been able to know if there was someone 200 years ago who had the Nika power. Now, this kind of gives us a possible answer to that, and something that other people are probably going to point out as well, is the fact that it could have been someone else who had the Toshi Toshi no Mi, that, the years fruit or so that Bonnie has. And of course, if this is someone who, like Bonnie, who is able to use this fruit to have a distorted future where they are like Nika, where they are totally free like Nika, then that would have activated the devil fruit. Then that would have activated the drum devil fruit, or the heartbeat, the drum beat that Nika gives off, that Luffy gives off as Nika, and that now Bonnie can give off as well when she's in this form. And if it had been that this person had tried to attack Mary Geoise 200 years ago, or had activated this power close enough to one of the giant robots, and it activated and it climbed up to Mary Geoise and tried to attack, it could have been that they had someone at Mary Geoise at the time who had this ability, who was a slave who had this ability. Now, over the course of the last 800 years, Fisher Tiger could not have been the only one to have staged a successful slave rebellion. And it could have been 200 years ago, there could have been someone else who did this, who had been this slave that knew about Nika, that had heard about the sun god Nika, and heard about, the drum beat and everything. And I keep having Heartbeat song by Kelly Clarkson run through my head right now. Which is kind of applicable here, because it is, the drum beat of a heart. And there is, like, this kind of theory that can be placed here in regards to, someone else who had Bonnie's devil fruit. And we know that Saturn would have gotten his hands on the fruit somehow, and that's how he would have intravenously been able to give it to Bonnie when she was, a baby inside of Ginny. That would have been, like, he would have had to have gotten his hands on the devil fruit at some point in time anyway. And, had it been that someone previously had the devil fruit, had been a slave, maybe they gave the slave the devil fruit in order to try to, just test to see what the heck the devil fruit did, because either maybe they didn't know what the devil fruit did, or they wanted to test the limitations of it and try that with a slave or someone else that he was just using as a test subject. And that person may have ended up being able to activate the devil fruit the same way that Bonnie did, and having this distorted version of a future where they are, they're most free, where they are like Nika. By the way, I'm going to love it when we get these Bonnie as Nika scenes animated. Back when she turned into it during the Alufa stuff and some other bits, and then this bit. Where it's just going to be fun in that regard. I'm going to love that. I'm going to love watching that. That's going to be great. But this concept of someone else had this devil fruit, not the Gum Gum fruit, not the Gum Gum no Mi that Luffy has. That was, like, out of the hands of the government for 800 years. They could never quite get their hands on it. To lock it away and keep it away from anybody else who could possibly use it and could possibly awaken the power of Nika, until it landed in Shanks' hands and then Luffy's hands. Well, first it was in Who's hands, then it was in Shanks' hands, then it was in Luffy's stomach. And now Luffy's awakened it. And Bonnie having this devil fruit, having the Toshi Toshi no Mi, and to be fair, I think Bonnie would have been one of the other ones who would have been able to awaken the Gumma Gumma no Mi had she eaten it. Although I don't know if she would have been able to figure out necessarily that it was the devil fruit connected with Nika. Although given the circumstances of her, of her childhood and everything like that, had she ended up with that devil fruit, it probably would have ended up being something similar down the line, where she would figure out I know this drum beat. I know this form. I have Nika's powers. Like, just Bonnie's, like, reaction to that would have been amazing had she figured that out. Had she had the Gomu Gomu no Mi, that would have been amazing to see. But in regards to, Luffy and Bonnie here, this implies that, a previous user of the Toshi Toshi no Mi activating this, like, distorted future of Nika could have resulted in the giant activating 200 years ago, climbing the red line, and then seemingly almost attacking Marijois. And what could have happened was the Gorosei, or Saturn more specifically, or whoever was experimenting on her at the time, probably was Saturn, could have been the other Gorosei involved as well, at Imu's behest or something, were experimenting. This happened, activated into someone activating this type of a future, resulting in the drum beat, and then the robot arrived, tried to attack, and then they figured it out, and then they unalived the slave that had this power, that had this ability, because they figured out what happened, and they unalived them, and then the robot stopped. And then they're like, get rid of that thing. And that could have explained how it got there in the first place, how it was activated, how it got there in the first place, and then why it deactivated, because its power source died, because its power source seems to be the drum beat of liberation from Nika, that the drums of liberation in that regard. Now, whether or not the giant is going to be able to, like, somehow activate something and get out of the water, try to get up out of the water and do something else, it's been hyped up so much, we would like to see it do something else besides be hiding a message from Vegapunk and roaming the island, like, really slowly. And if there's two Nika, does that mean it's going to power up faster and it can, like, try to get out of the water? And if it could jump up, and if it could somehow get out of the water and, launch itself out of the water and, like, hit Mars to prevent Mars from following them, that would be very helpful. The other option, obviously, would be, like, have it help with catching the Thousand Sunny, so it lands safely. Not that, Sanji and, Frankie wouldn't try to make sure that it landed safely, and all of that. I mean, admittedly, it's fallen from much greater heights and probably been fine, considering that it's been launched by Kude Burst multiple times over the years, over the course of the story, and been fine. But it's still, dropping from a very high height is still not good on a ship, even if it is made of atom wood by Frankie, who is one of the best shipwrights in the world. So there's that involved there. The other thought is Luffy and Bonnie in their Nika forms are just going to, like, I don't know, double punch Mars, which would be hilarious to watch, and just, like, send Mars flying or some variation of that. And just have this great team-up moment between the two of them, which is just going to be awesome to watch. I love this. I love Bonnie as Nika. I think it is so adorable, and I'm going to be so happy when there's, like, merch with it, because they're going to make merch with her as Nika and Luffy paired together. They're going to do that. I'm going to love that, and I'm going to want to get one, depending on how much it costs. But, like, there's probably going to be that. Zoro and Jinbei being able to get away from Noshiro might not be all that hard. It depends on whether or not, what's going to happen there. We know that the Gorosei are going to still try to go after Atlas at the moment and still try to go after Lilith. Given the circumstances of, like, you want to chop off those loose ends, as they stated, so that way they can just have York be the only one left that can interact with Punk Records. But we'll see exactly how that ends up coming together in this regard. Also, cutting all over the world, seeing all of the other people, they're going to be like, well, yeah, but didn't Vegapunk say that he couldn't judge the person that killed him, so he may not know, but because he recorded the message before he died, so how do we know that it was Straw Hat? But Straw Hat did this, and Straw Hat did that. And unless it's going to be something where, like, there is going to be another camera that like activates somewhere and they're able to film something here, film something of Luffy and Bonnie being in these forms. That would be amazing. Or if Morgan shows up and gets pictures of this, shows up in his teapot with Vivi and Wapol in the teapot and his flying teapot, which I love, and like shows up and gets these pictures of Luffy and Bonnie as these Nika forms. That would be an amazing way of like spreading the story around the world and having it be that those who know that Luffy is good are able to be like, yes, this is what Luffy is, and now he's got this connection to this sun god type of a thing. Plus there's the whole theory that like Morgans is someone that used to be on Roger's crew and that he's been in disguise and been like working his way up through the ranks over the years and eventually is now in control of this paper. And while he is still like a great newsman and he wants to have all these amazing stories and everything like that, he's been waiting for the proper time to make a reveal of something. There's that theory that goes around a lot, but we'll see how everything ends up playing out in the end. So that's what I have for this chapter. I hope you enjoyed it, and I hope you have a nice rest of your day. Bye!